the soul behind the world's most joyful music was quietly saying goodbye forever. As André Rieu faces a life-altering diagnosis, his wife Marjorie, the silent force who built his empire from the shadows, is stepping away. But why now? And what heartbreaking truth has been kept from fans until this moment? Stay with us, because what you're about to uncover will change how you hear every note of his music. She was the powerhouse behind the curtain, the mastermind whose name rarely made headlines. But without her, the empire would never have risen. For nearly 50 years, Marjorie Rieu shaped a classical music dynasty. She was more than a partner to André Rieu. She was the strategist, the writer, the planner, the voice of calm in a whirlwind of standing ovations and sold-out arenas. Yet now, just as André marks a monumental milestone, 75 years celebrated by millions, Marjorie is quietly stepping away, her exit cloaked not in scandal, but in something far more intimate: heartbreak and exhaustion. What led the woman who orchestrated it all to walk off stage without applause? It wasn't a sudden collapse. The unraveling began back in 2012, though its roots dug deeper. At the height of André's fame, everything looked perfect from the outside. He was the undisputed king of waltz, his Johann Strauss orchestra filling stadiums across continents. He was a machine. No breaks, no breakdowns, no burnout. Interviews, performances, world tours, he carried them all like clockwork. Until one July night in Belgium, when his world quite literally spun out of control. In the early hours of morning, André jolted awake. The room was tilting, the ceiling danced above him, and he couldn't find his balance. Drenched in sweat and racked with nausea, he couldn't even stand. At first he brushed it off. Perhaps he'd been working too hard again. He had crammed recordings, travel, language lessons, and rehearsals into a single week. Maybe this was just the price of ambition. But by daylight, things hadn't improved. They'd worsened. The spinning didn't stop. The ground didn't steady. And for the first time in decades, André admitted something was wrong. Doctors diagnosed him with vestibular neuritis, a viral inner ear condition that attacks the nerve-controlling balance. For most, it's a difficult illness. For someone like André, whose livelihood depended on motion, poise, and control, it was devastating. He couldn't walk straight, couldn't rehearse, couldn't even hold his violin without nausea hitting like a wave. And the timing couldn't have been worse. A massive concert in Amsterdam loomed just days away. 60,000 fans, sold out. But for the first time in his storied career, there would be no last-minute recovery. His doctor gave a single prescription: absolute rest. And that's when the storm began, not only for André, but for Marjorie too. Because behind every sold-out show, every polished stage was her. A trained composer, a multilingual businesswoman, and the engine that kept André's global brand running. Since marrying him in 1975, she wasn't just his wife. She was his business partner, creative collaborator, and emotional anchor. But this illness wasn't something she could schedule around. The empire, for the first time, stood still. Tour dates across Australia and the UK were scrapped. These weren't minor cancellations. They involved hundreds of people: musicians, stage crews, lighting techs, drivers, logistics teams. The economic blow was staggering. At the time, André's monthly expenses exceeded £825,000, and that didn't even touch his personal income. Dozens of salaries depended on those shows. The pressure was immense. But inside the walls of their 15th-century Maastricht castle, a lifelong dream realized by André, Marjorie held firm. She stepped in and took over everything. She dealt with the press, the finances, the scheduling nightmares, and she protected André from himself. Because even as vertigo made simple steps unbearable, André kept pushing. He wanted pills. He wanted to rehearse. He begged to get back on stage. But nothing worked. His body refused. And Marjorie was the one who had to say what no one else could. This wasn't about willpower. It was about staying alive. This was the man who once believed he could outthink exhaustion. That sheer optimism could push him through anything. But even the strongest performers have limits, and André had hit his. For nearly 3 months, he was bedridden. He couldn't even pick up his grandchildren, let alone a violin. At one point, he joked that the constant sweating reminded him of menopause. Behind the humor was discomfort, shame, and quiet panic. To rule out worst-case scenarios, doctors performed a brain scan. Thankfully, there was no tumor. But the recovery path wasn't short or simple. There was no magic cure, just grueling physical therapy, balance retraining, tiny repetitive movements. Stand on one leg, trace invisible shapes with his foot, move his eyes from side to side. 3 times a day, every day. Slowly, the vertigo faded. But the fear never fully left. Because vestibular neuritis has a relapse rate, and stress is its fuel. So André and Marjorie had to rethink everything. What was essential? What was draining him? They sat down and wrote 2 lists. One for the things that gave him life, playing music, connecting with audiences, recording albums. The second? Everything that sucked the joy away. Interviews, logistics, board meetings, press obligations. That second list was too long, so they cut it, ruthlessly. From that moment on, André would do only the things he loved. Marjorie would shield him from the rest. That wasn't just about protecting time, it was about protecting health. Because Marjorie had seen the cost. She'd seen the fear in his eyes when he couldn't stand, the weight of shame when he needed help to get to the bathroom. And she made sure the public never saw how close the collapse came. Through it all, she stayed out of the spotlight. She rarely joined André on stage or in interviews. But every note he played, every boo he took, echoed with her effort behind the scenes. Their bond was never flashy. It was forged in decades of trust, strategy, and survival. And now, as André stands strong at 75, it's Marjorie who chooses a quieter path, her final encore not with fanfare, but with quiet resilience. Because sometimes, the biggest strength is knowing when to step back. She was never content with simply being called André Rieu's wife. Marjorie Rieu had dreams of her own, a mind that never needed a spotlight to shine. Yet behind every ovation, every perfectly timed waltz, it was Marjorie holding steady, often just out of frame. And when life threw chaos their way, she didn't blink. She became the quiet force that carried André through the storm. Their life together has spanned decades, raising 2 sons, now surrounded by 5 grandchildren. They live in the same castle where André, as a boy, first laid his hands on piano keys, a place soaked in memory, love, and the sound of second chances. And through it all, Marjorie kept her feet firmly on the ground, even when the world around them spun faster than anyone could control. In 2013, André made a return to the stage. Doctors were amazed at how quickly he recovered. His commitment to therapy, precise routines, and a stricter lifestyle had stabilized his condition. But the shadows of that scare never fully disappeared. For Marjorie, her role evolved beyond being the supportive spouse of a world-famous musician. She became his safeguard, quietly watching over him to ensure he never pushed himself too far again. It wasn't just about logistics anymore. It was about preserving the man she loved. Because when your partner stands before thousands each night, wearing a smile, lifting a bow, people rarely see the toll behind that grace. But she saw it, every time. Then came 2017, a turning point that would crack open a much deeper reckoning. This wasn't about an external virus or a postponed show. This time the pressure was internal, and it was relentless. André faced another health scare, and it stopped him cold. For a man used to defying the limits of time, age, and exhaustion, this was a blunt reminder. Something had to give. Touring non-stop, managing a massive orchestra, juggling the weight of global fame, it had taken its toll. His body was waving a red flag, and this time he didn't just hear it. He listened. André brought in a new team, personal trainer, specialized diet coach, a physician who understood the unique demands of his lifestyle. And this wasn't about vanity or aesthetics. This was about survival. He began a new routine built on discipline, strength, and the one thing he'd often neglected: rest. Carefully structured workouts replaced spontaneous rehearsals. Meals were balanced, tailored, and timed. And every move was logged to rebuild his stamina from within. For a man in his 70s, his transformation was stunning. He wasn't just keeping up. He was moving with the vitality of someone half his age. And like any good conductor, his energy sparked a movement within his own orchestra. The Johann Strauss Orchestra didn't just follow him musically. They began mirroring his health journey. Musicians booked group workouts in hotel gyms. Some even joined marathons during breaks between performances. The mood backstage shifted. Health wasn't a background concern, it became a shared culture. This quiet revolution in routine helped explain the seemingly impossible: how a man André's age manages to lead 4-hour performances 5 nights a week across continents without missing a beat. And through it all, family remained his compass. Inside his violin case, tucked safely beside the strings, are photos of his grandchildren. Every concert begins with a text from his sons, snapshots of home, laughter, ordinary life. He wears his wedding ring not on his finger but around his neck, safety first when commanding a stage. These aren't just sentimental gestures, they are lifelines. In a life filled with flashing lights and constant movement, these pieces of home keep him centered. Back home, Marjorie watches from the shadows, not needing the applause to know her place. That castle in Maastricht, their sanctuary, pulses with memories. While the world sees André's public triumphs, few understand that Marjorie has shaped almost every chapter behind the scenes. For more than 4 decades, she has helped write scripts, outline concert structures, organize logistics, and quietly edit his story while never demanding a spotlight of her own. Their love story traces back to the 1970s, when she was a young language teacher and he, the shy boy at his sister's holiday party. When fate reunited them years later, they didn't hesitate, but not everyone was thrilled. André's strict parents didn't warm to Marjorie's free-spirited energy right away. Still, the couple moved forward with a shared work ethic, unshaken by outside doubts. By 1978, André had joined the Limburg Symphony Orchestra and began playing small local gigs. Around that same time, Marjorie learned she was expecting. Life didn't slow down, it picked up. They juggled parenting, lesson plans, and nursing dreams bigger than any one concert hall. Marjorie designed brochures by hand, scripted the dialogue between performances, even stood in freezing venues pitching concert dates. There was a time they played free shows for barely a dozen people, but they dreamed of theaters echoing with standing ovations. When their 1994 album Strauss & Company unexpectedly took off, propelled by the viral success of the Second Waltz, people called it luck. But behind that breakout was a decade of grit, late nights, and relentless vision. Yet even triumph comes with its own weight. In 2008, they nearly lost it all after investing heavily in a replica of Schönbrunn Palace. It was a financial risk that nearly pushed them to the brink. Marjorie watched the numbers fall with sleepless nights, her mind constantly calculating survival strategies. But she remained composed. Their son Pierre, now part of the business, brought in modern tactics to balance André's creative impulse with fiscal logic. Together, they pulled through. Today, Marjorie avoids the cameras. She rarely grants interviews. When she travels, it's under her maiden name. It's not fear, it's choice. While André becomes more of a household name with every tour, Marjorie retreats into peace. At home, life moves slower. André cooks simple, healthy meals. They sit in the orangery, a vibrant indoor garden he designed himself. With butterflies floating under painted ceilings and koi gliding through pools beneath Tuscan murals, it's here they recharge. But the real heartbeat of André's discipline? That came from one surprising place, a father-in-law whose quiet strength would unknowingly shape André's very understanding of legacy and resilience. And that influence? It's just beginning to unfold. He may not have lifted a baton or stood beneath bright stage lights, but Edgar Coleman's legacy sings through every performance André Rieu delivers. A man hidden from the world's applause, yet woven into its soundtrack. Edgar survived one of the darkest chapters in history, protected during the war by a courageous young Dutch girl named Nelly, who would later become his wife and André's mother-in-law. That love story wasn't just romantic, it was heroic. Nelly joined the Dutch resistance and risked her life to hide Jewish families from danger. Years later, a simple letter from an Israeli family arrived, thanking her for saving their grandmother's life. That moment didn't fade into history. It ignited something deep in André, a connection far more powerful than heritage. It was a moral rhythm that shaped his musical soul. And then came the records, hundreds of them. When André married Marjorie in 1975, he inherited not just a family, but a musical compass. Edgar's collection was unlike anything André had known. For a man raised on Bach and Beethoven, Edgar's vinyls were a revelation. Operettas, 1920s ballads, the Beatles, the Stones, voices that stretched far beyond classical halls. It wasn't just sound, it was freedom. That collection didn't gather dust. It became the pulse of the Maastricht Salon Orchestra. It rewrote the rules, the flair, the joy, the unexpected mix of nostalgia and flair. It all traced back to Edgar's records and Marjorie's creative instincts. Here's the part few know. Behind every lush waltz and teary-eyed encore, there was emotional engineering. Edgar didn't teach André music, he taught him to feel it. That heart-first approach became Rieu's secret weapon. It's why, decades later, André's concerts aren't recitals, they're celebrations. His version of Hava Nagila, posted in 2010, has quietly become one of the most viewed classical performances online, over 14 million views. Not because it's flashy, but because it resonates. It's an echo of survival, of joy born from struggle. That's the kind of depth audiences feel, even if they can't name it. Whenever André steps onto a stage in Israel, the atmosphere shifts, flags wave, audiences sing, and he returns the gesture, not with pomp, but with sincerity. Songs like Jerusalem of Gold become bridges, not just ballads. Since 2018, every Tel Aviv performance has felt like a homecoming. André knows that music isn't just entertainment, it's remembrance, it's gratitude, and it's deeply personal. Even when the world shut down, André kept playing. When concert halls went dark, he created light from his living room. During lockdown, he baked for his neighbors and stitched together archived footage to create Magical Maastricht, a digital concert streamed globally from December to January. It was more than nostalgia. It was a love letter to fans around the world. And it reminded them that even in silence, music finds a way. Fast forward to today and André is 75. But slowing down? Not even close. This year, he launched The Dream Continues, a cinematic global concert experience that plays like a documentary of his life and legacy. From Vienna to Sydney, from Bahrain to New York, fans are treated to a front-row seat to the moments that defined him. One unforgettable number? A soaring take on music of the night from Phantom of the Opera. Another, a heartfelt duet with his brother Robert, singing Pai Jesu, revisiting their childhood in Maastricht. Each note feels like a page in a diary, one written in courage, loss, joy, and relentless optimism. And just when you think his story's complete, in walks Emma. Since 2024, she's toured alongside André and the Johann Strauss Orchestra, visiting countries like Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. Her presence is more than symbolic, it's transitional. André is not passing a torch, he's expanding the flame. His story is no longer his alone, it's becoming a legacy shared with a new generation of musicians. Which brings us to the lifestyle that few fans ever see. Despite the elegance on stage, André's world is built with quiet opulence. He has long resided in a centuries-old castle in Maastricht, restored with stunning care and detail, complete with private music studios and lush gardens. As André celebrates a milestone birthday, there's a growing awareness among fans. This isn't just a career, it's a movement. A reminder that great things often begin with quiet love stories, hidden record collections, and the bravery of people who never ask for recognition. Marjorie, now stepping back from the stage and tour life, remains the architect of André's empire. She believed in the dream when it was nothing more than sheet music and big hopes. And now, as her husband plays to thousands, she watches from the wings, not as someone fading out, but as someone whose impact will never fade. So where does the journey lead next? With Emma stepping into the spotlight, André's orchestra crossing continents, and the music still echoing across sold-out stadiums, the answer couldn't be clearer. The waltz doesn't end, it evolves, and with every step, it reminds us that behind every great artist, there's a story, deep, emotional, and endlessly inspiring. And that's the incredible story behind Marjorie Rieu's Quiet Goodbye. If you felt the music behind the story, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. We've got more heartfelt legends coming your way. Because in the world of André and Marjorie, every farewell is just the start of another waltz.